The views and opinions expressed on Real Talk with Horace Sheffield are not those of WADL TV 38 or Adele Broadcasting Corporation.
Talk, real talk, real talk. Take a walk down this path through Detroit. This is real talk, real talk, real talk. Real issues straight from the heart. Giving you real talk, real talk, real talk. Take a walk down this path through Detroit. This is real talk, real talk, real talk. Real talk, real talk, real talk. Take a walk down this path through Detroit. This is real talk, real talk, real talk. Real issues straight from the heart. Giving you.
Hi, I'm Reverend Horace Sheffield, third host of Real Talk here on WADL Detroit. Of course, this is my co-host,
Deanna Solomon.
And we've got a great guest for us, Daniel Baxter, today, who has the responsibility of making certain that the election process is in place, and he can't get you to the polls, but when you get to the polls, he's responsible for you when you get there. First question I have is, people talk about this massive, unprecedented turnout that took place in the election when President Obama was elected. Is that fact or fiction?
That's fact.
Okay.
The
2008,
voter turnout
correct?
in 2008 in the city of Detroit, our voter turnout was approximately 54%, which was unprecedented. We haven't had that type of turnout in Detroit probably since the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
So it was pretty
And
significant.
what is the normal turnout for a presidential election?
It hovers right around 50 to 52%. So we increased by 2 percentage points in the city of Detroit.
So then, Mr. Baxter, unless I'm doing math incorrectly, are you saying a 2% increase is massive?
Oh, it was significant, yeah, in the city of Detroit, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to point that out because there are people who say that it was negligible, and maybe that's because they view 2% as negligible. But from your standpoint, I guess you know what increases and decreases are big and small.
Right.
So from your standpoint, that 2% was large.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you look at it from the absentee voting standpoint, we had more than 80,000 people to vote by absentee in the city of Detroit. In particular, the 2 weeks leading up to the election, we had more than 20,000 people to come to the Detroit Department of Elections and vote
there
by absentee, which was significant. That was a significant ordeal that impacted our department.
Let's start there real quick, and then Ms. Solomon can chime in. The absentee voter process, there's been a whole lot that's happened around that in terms of being able to notify. I mean, can you just kind of spell that out for? I mean, I know there were some challenges to the way you've done that in the past. What were they, and what is the new process?
Well, one of the issues that reared its head in Detroit was in 2005 when the former clerk mailed out absentee voter applications against the ruling of the circuit court judge at that particular time, which was Mary Beth Kelly. Her ruling in 2006 required that, or precluded, local clerks for mailing unsolicited absentee voter applications to any citizen in the city of Detroit. Prior to that time, we mailed out approximately 145,000 absentee voter applications to individuals who were 60 years of age or older. As a consequence, individuals who receive absentee ballots automatically must first be placed on a permanent AV list, absentee voter list. They must call in or send a request into the department to be placed on such a list. Since that time, that number, our permanent AV list, has grown to approximately 50,000 individuals. In fact, next week we'll be mailing out all of those absentee voter applications to the citizens of the city of Detroit who are on the permanent AV list.
Okay, so that's how they get the application.
That is correct.
Okay, one last question about that is, with that change coerced by the courts, has it had a detrimental effect on the number of AV voters? Have you seen a decrease as a result of that?
Well, the first year we did see a significant decrease But as time progressed, as I mentioned in 2008, we had 80,000 individuals to vote by absentee.
So people kind of picked up on what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And made up for it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Solomon?
Okay. I know, Mr. Baxter, again, welcome to Real Talk. Your title with the Elections Department is the Director of Elections. Tell us what your area of responsibility is with the City Clerk's office.
Well, first and foremost, the City Clerk is responsible. She's the Chief Elections Official. She is also the record keeper of the City of Detroit, and she is the clerk to the council. That gives her 3 duties and responsibilities. She has 3 offices, which is the Archives Department, which manages and maintains records, and then there's the City Clerk's office, which is downtown, that is responsible for assisting council. And then there's the Department of Elections. That's at 2978 West Grand Boulevard, and that is the department that I'm director of. And my primary function is to administer any and all elections that affect the City of Detroit, be it a special election, a local election, municipal, state election, gubernatorial, or national election, which is presidential, congressional, or senatorial elections.
Okay. And I know that you're here today to talk about a very special topic that is going to affect those of us living in the City of Detroit in regards to our voter ID card.
Well, I found out something I didn't know, and that's districts are gone, so you know, I've got a new number I'm not even aware of. We'll be right back after that. We're going to get you all the information you need so you have no excuse. Welcome back to Real Talk. I'm Reverend Sheffield. Of course, this is Deanna Solomon, and we're talking about the elections. And you want to repose that question so he can tackle all of it?
You know, I do, Reverend Sheffield. I've heard about our new voter ID cards that are going to be coming out soon. So I'm anticipating mine, and I wanted to know what's the timeline. Will it look different than the old voter ID card? And what's prompted all of this, and how soon should we expect them? Run us through the whole gamut.
And how you now identify polling locations that are different than the districts.
Absolutely. As you know, 2010 was the census year.
Yes.
The results came in the early part of last year, well, latter part of last year, and it revealed that we had 713,777 citizens in the City of Detroit. As a consequence, every legislative body that represents the City of Detroit was responsible for redrawing their lines based upon the population data. That's federal, state, and local bodies.
Now, you said population data, but you mean population decrease.
The numbers.
Yes, population decrease, correct.
Because every political district has a certain number of people to represent that district. So many thousands, hundreds of thousands for congressional districts, etc.
Yep, and as a consequence, those lines were handed down to the Department of Elections, and we were responsible for adjusting the boundaries of all of the voting precincts in the City of Detroit. As a consequence, our population in terms of our precincts dropped from 529 to 489. One caveat that we need to consider is that Detroit used to have 24 districts, districts 3 through 26. Districts 1 and 2 were in Highland Park and Hamtramck. And those districts represented state representative districts. As time progressed, of course, the population dropped, then our state representative districts dropped as well. We have come to a point at this particular time where the district numbers are now insignificant. And as a consequence, voters will be receiving new voter identification cards at the end of this month, the early part of June, with all of their new legislative information on it, their new state rep districts, their new state senate districts, the United States Congress districts, as well as their new precinct numbers. Precincts numbers will range from the number 1 to 489.
All in the City of Detroit?
That's correct.
Like I'm 200 and something, which I just found out recently. Yep.
So there will no longer be a prefix. And we know that sometimes abrupt change is disruptive, in terms of the way that we're comfortable with dealing with information. So when voters receive their new voter identification cards, the new district number will be at the top. And then in parentheses, your old district and precinct will be on there as a reminder, so that when you go to the precincts on election day, everything won't be new to you. So on the voter identification card, you'll have that information as well as your polling location information. It is a trifold.
Oh, now it's trifold. So
Yeah,
the look is different.
The look will be different, but it's
Okay.
the exact same. The trifold is more informational. It provides you information about the upcoming election, the August 7th primary, the November 6th general election, the close of registration, the day when the department can accept absentee voter application, new laws that have impacted the voting process, such as you having to declare your citizenship, informational reminders such as you must present identification at the precinct on election day. And there'll also be a blurb on there for those individuals who may receive voter identification cards at their households for family members or friends who no longer live there. If an individual no longer lives at a particular address, the post office is responsible for returning it back to the Department of Elections, but sometime...
But the resident has to give it to the person, right?
Well, oftentimes what the post office does is they run it through their particular program. If that person no longer lives at that particular address,
I mean, based on a change of address.
right, based on a change of address, right, they'll return it as undeliverable.
Yeah. But but that only lasts so long, and the
Correct.
length for change of address request has been shortened.
Right.
So it expires.
Right.
And so I would say we'd ask residents, if you know that person no longer lives there, that you give it back to your postal carrier.
Postal carrier or contact the Department
Now,
of Elections.
the issue of identification to vote, I've heard as recent as the date of this taping, someone on the radio suggests that you can still vote even without ID. You simply have to do a sworn affidavit or something. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Now, I want to put that out there because there are people who may not have legitimate ID or whatever. You can still go and vote.
That's correct.
You just have to affirm that you are who you say you are, and
Yes.
then that is checked.
Yep.
And then later on, that vote is counted if, in fact, it matches the record you have.
Correct. No, not later on. At that
that
time.
moment, okay,
Yes, at
good,
that
good,
particular
good,
moment,
good.
you fill out the affidavit on the back of the application to vote.
Right.
As long as your name is on the qualified voter file, voter registration list, and you're present at the precinct on election day, if you don't have identification, you just fill out the affidavit and you're processed just like any other voter.
Yeah. A couple of new things. I really appreciate the fact that everything was computerized, and that they had laptops there and they could pull the records up online. I think that made a big difference. The other question that I have is, I have a lot of questions, is how long does it take for your name to be purged? If you don't vote in so many elections.
Right. The voter IDs that come back to the Department of Elections as undeliverable. The National Voter Registration Act of 1983 changed the way how local jurisdictions may purge their voter registrations. Prior to that, you could, once a person was inactive for 4 years, that person's record was placed in an inactive file.
Let's do this. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll pick up on when you can no longer vote because you didn't vote when you should have voted.
Down this path through Detroit, this is real talk, real issues, street.
Welcome back. I'm, of course, Reverend Sheffield. I forgot to mention before, this was Daniel Baxter again, and, of course, Deanna Solomon, my host. We're talking about what used to happen in terms of purging names. If you didn't vote in 4 years, you were automatically removed, and you updated us on what the rule or the law is now.
Right. Well, after 4 years, you were placed in an inactive file.
Okay.
Correct. And then 3 years thereafter, your record was canceled, and you were notified that your record was going to be canceled. Well, in '93, after NVRA, that ceased. In order to cancel a voter's record at this particular time, what has to happen is that you have to have reliable information that the person is either deceased or no longer lives at the address. The post office is reliable information. The obituaries that are in the News Free Press or the Michigan Chronicle, they're considered as reliable information. Once we receive that information, we can cancel that record immediately. But in the event that when we mail out our voter registrations and we receive those cards returned as undeliverable, then at that instance, a record has to be placed in a file that's called cancellation countdown. After that particular time, that record cannot be canceled until 2 consecutive federal elections. So when we receive voter ID cards returned as undeliverable this year, the first federal election will be on November 6, 2012, and then after November 2014, we can cancel that record.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's just to be a little funny. I mean, these people who engage in voter suppression, you know, who want to keep us from voting, maybe we should subject them to reading obituaries to find out who can't vote, you know?
Right.
I mean, they're doing everything else.
You're right.
And I want to talk about that because I was involved with Congressman Conyers where we went over to Elmwood Park to the Coleman and Young Rec Center, where some people, you know, who happen to be white, happen to be Republican, literally scared people away from the polls and said to them that, you know, they could be arrested and all these different things would happen to them if, in fact, you know, they voted. They use, you know, credit judgments. I mean, there's all kind of things that are being said. But can any of those things keep you from voting?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The only thing that can
Not
keep you
even
from voting,
folks in white sheets.
That's correct.
Okay.
The only thing that can preclude you from voting is you not going to the polls on election day.
So it's really in your power to go and vote. No one can keep you from doing that. Do you have means to take complaints from folks if they feel that they're being harassed?
Absolutely. Citizens may submit that complaint at the precinct on election day or come to the Department of Elections on election day to provide us with that information, or after the election they can write us letters. And we do receive complaints from citizens as well as poll workers about certain issues that they experienced at the precinct on election day, and we address those immediately.
I'm wondering, when you look at some of the challenges that come with voting, what happens if I don't receive my voter ID card? How do I figure out where to go and you know, what my new precinct number is and who's in my new district? So how do I find that information out? Is it available online?
Yeah, it's available online,
Okay.
and you have another opportunity to receive information from the department. Prior to every elections, we mail out a newsletter, and on that newsletter, it has your polling location and your precinct on it.
Oh, the Election Connection?
The Election Connection newsletter. It has that information on there. So you have a second opportunity to grasp that information. In addition, we provide it in the Detroit News as well as the Michigan Chronicle. And if that fails, then you can go on the internet to the Department of Elections at detroitmi.gov and click on the prompt that will lead you to the state Department of Elections website, where you can type in your information and find out where your polling location is.
They don't have internet, they don't have access to papers, or they don't like to read. Is there a phone number they can call?
Absolutely. They can contact the Department of Elections at 313-876-0190.
One more time.
313-876-0190.
Ms. Solomon?
Okay. So we've talked about early voting. We've talked about the new ID cards that are coming out. Let's talk about connecting the dots.
Sure.
Reverend Sheffield had a concept that we sort of worked together on and put on paper a few months ago that directly talks about we the people and all of our complaints and issues and personal drama.
Simply, I've got it broken down. The correlation between their personal circumstance
That's right.
and the decision not to vote. By not voting, someone somewhere that someone else voted for, or is there because you didn't vote, are making decisions that affect your everyday life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can connect the dots
That's right.
straight from that personal experience
That's right.
all the way back to
Some
voting
person
polls.
sitting
right.
somewhere
That's
who
right.
don't know you,
That's right.
has ideas about you, and has a certain design for you.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. You know, if you think about it, the air you breathe, if you don't like the way it smells, you have to refer to the Clean Air Act. You know,
Right.
that's legislation that was passed in order to allow for or preclude from harmful carcinogens to be in the atmosphere. You know, the clothes that we wear. Does it come from China? You know, the imports, all of the acts that were passed, you know, to allow for items to be imported in the United States of America. You know, everything.
You
The
can't
new
be
voter ID
born,
cards.
you
That's
can't be
right.
born, you can't get married, and
That's
you can't
right.
die
That's right.
unless some politician says it's actually a fact.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is the elections department doing to help get people out to increase the number, increase the percentage of voters in the city of Detroit? Is that a role that you take responsibility for?
Well, yes, it's a role that we take responsibility for. However, if you look at the numbers in terms of municipal elections, presidential elections, and gubernatorial elections, the granddaddy of elections is presidential elections.
Yes.
Why is that? It's because you have media coverage. You have more money being spent in presidential elections than any other elections in the United States of America.
Sure.
So in order to increase voter turnout, guess what you have to do? You have
money.
to spend money.
Right.
You have to campaign. You have to shake the bushes. You got to go where no other person has gone before in order to engage individuals so that you as a candidate can be elected. As you go to the gubernatorial election, there's less dollars. Municipal elections, less dollars.
Right.
School board elections, no dollars.
Right.
So as a consequence, voter turnout drops as a result of that. The Department of Elections, we take a role in that. That's why we send out election connection newsletters to apprise
And by the way,
voters.
that's why we're here, because of what really happens, if you don't mind me saying this, is the people who benefit from us not voting are the ones who convinced us that you don't get anything from voting.
That's correct.
Now, that's the real fact. I mean, the
true.
reality is we let other folk make decisions for us
Yeah.
that we could change. We'd have to call talk radio and complain about. All right, Ms. Simon wants to give us a quick reminder about the voter ID cards.
Well, I just want all the Detroiters to look for and watch for your new voter ID card. Mr. Baxter here explained it's a trifold, but it looks very similar to our old voter ID card with all of the particulars and even more information. So look for that so you know where to go on Election Day.
And by the way, it's not the boogeyman. It's not somebody wearing sheets. It's you talking about what's wrong but never wanting to make it right. Make it right, get connected, go out and vote, get registered. Let's make it happen. Obama! See you next week.